You step back in time, they are shimmering with heat, the soft splash of water nearby. Picture this, the grand Egyptian palace courtyard where the sun-drenched stones radiate warmth, and in the shade of a papyrus-draped pool, an enormous crocodile lounges lazily, tail half-draped into the water. Yes, a crocodile. And not just any crocodile. This creature, named Swift One by the royal handlers, has been doted on since it was small enough to fit in someone's arms. A playful nudge with its powerful snout sends a wave across the pond. Courtiers walk by with careful steps, balancing trays of honey cakes and dates, offerings both for the king and, incredibly, for the crocodile. Before we dive deeper into this story, remember, these crocodiles were not exactly your fluffy family pets. And between you and me, you probably wouldn't last 5 minutes in a pharaoh's palace courtyard with a croc as your pet. And tell me, where are you listening from tonight? What time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As you stroll along this courtyard in your mind's eye, imagine the scent of lotus blossoms mingling with the tang of the Nile. This pool isn't just decorative. It's a carefully managed habitat, fed by channels carved from the river itself. The Nile, after all, is life to the Egyptians, both the source of their crops and, perhaps ironically, the reason for their fear of crocodiles. Crocs like Swift One didn't just show up uninvited. They were brought in, often captured as hatchlings by brave fishermen who knew exactly where to look. Historians still argue whether these crocodiles were truly cherished companions or more like showpieces for the elite. One thing's for sure, a pharaoh showing off his crocodile pool was flexing in the ancient world's version of an Instagram post. The sheer audacity of having a literal living dinosaur in your garden. It sent a message: I'm powerful, I'm divine, and yes, I'm a little bit unhinged. The caretakers, priests in crisp linen robes, would feed the crocs by hand. Imagine that. They'd toss in offerings like honey-soaked bread, figs, or, on special days, whole geese plucked straight from the palace kitchens. The croc would lunge, snapping the treat in half, the sound echoing off the palace walls, and the spectators, they'd either hold their breath in awe, or quickly step back, just in case Swift One decided to come for a second helping. There's a story, half legend, half truth, about a pharaoh's son who tried to ride a crocodile. Let's just say that didn't end well. The boy's golden sandals were later fished from the pond, still glinting under the water. Some say the croc wore them like a crown for days. But not all the pets were crocs. Remember that part for later, because this palace had a whole menagerie, but we'll get there. For now, picture Swift One sliding into the water, scales glinting in the sun, and know this: in ancient Egypt, a crocodile wasn't just a beast. It was a symbol, a guardian, and sometimes, a ticking time bomb with teeth. The Nile, wide and glinting under the fierce sun, is more than a river. It's the lifeblood of Egypt, pulsing through the land like an artery. Without the Nile, there is no Egypt. The river floods its banks every year, leaving behind a dark, rich silt that feeds the crops, grains, fruits, and flax that keep the people fed and clothed. But while the Nile gives, it also takes. The waters teem with creatures, some small and harmless, others, like the crocodile, ready to snap. The ancient Egyptians had a strange relationship with the crocodile. They respected it, feared it, and in some cases, even worshipped it. Sobek, the crocodile-headed god, was said to control the waters and bring fertility to the land. Offerings were left at his temples, hoping for a good flood or a safe journey. It's a bit like leaving snacks for a dragon. You hope to please the beast, but deep down, you know it could still bite. Historians still argue whether the worship of Sobek arose out of pure fear or genuine admiration. After all, crocodiles could easily snatch a child or capsize a boat. But the Egyptians were practical. If you can't beat the crocodile, might as well pray it stays on your side. Imagine being a fisherman, gliding silently down a reed-lined channel, the water rippling under your oar. The air smells of wet earth and crushed lotus flowers. You toss a net into the water, but every splash makes your heart race because you know what's lurking beneath. Fishermen told tales of crocodiles so massive their tails could sweep a man right off a boat. Some said the largest crocs were the reincarnations of Sobek himself, watching to see who respected the river and who didn't. Crocodile tracks were a familiar sight along the muddy banks. Sharp claws, a dragging belly mark. They told the story of where the beast had been. Children would sometimes follow the tracks, daring each other to get close to the water, whispering about the river gods who ruled beneath the surface. And if a crocodile was spotted, the villagers might gather in quiet reverence, or else throw rocks from a safe distance depending on the day and their bravery levels. One quirky detail: some wealthier Egyptians believed that crocodile oil, mixed with herbs, could cure aches and even make your skin glow. Picture that, rubbing crocodile grease on your face and thinking, "Ah yes, now I'm invincible." It's the ancient version of buying fancy skincare creams with ingredients you can't pronounce. Meanwhile, in the temples of Sobek, the crocodiles had it good. They lived in special pools, tended by priests who fed them and cleaned their water. It wasn't just about worship, it was also a display of wealth and power. To have a crocodile under your care meant you were connected to the divine, that you had influence in the realm of gods and men. And if a crocodile passed away, it wasn't simply tossed aside. These creatures were mummified with just as much care as a beloved pet cat or even a royal family member. So next time you see a scaly reptile sunning itself, remember, to the ancient Egyptians, it wasn't just an animal. It was a symbol of life and death, of fear and faith, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit of style. Sobek, the crocodile god of ancient Egypt, wasn't just a decorative statue on a temple wall. He was a full-blown force of nature, with the head of a crocodile and the body of a man, often wearing a crown of feathers and holding the Ankh, the symbol of life itself. To the Egyptians, Sobek wasn't just a god of crocodiles, he was the river. He was the floodwaters that made the fields bloom, the ferocious predator lurking in the shallows, and the guardian of the afterlife. Imagine trying to win favor from a creature that could snap your head off in one bite, and yet you'd leave offerings and whisper prayers, hoping Sobek would keep his teeth to himself. The temples dedicated to Sobek weren't hidden away in tiny villages. They were grand, imposing structures, often located near crocodile-filled waterways. One of the most famous, the Temple of Kamombo, still stands today, with reliefs of Sobek carved into its walls. Visitors could walk through the halls, breathing in the scent of incense, listening to the chants of priests, and perhaps even catching a glimpse of a live crocodile sunning itself in a sacred pool nearby. The line between god and animal blurred. Was that crocodile a beast, or a piece of Sobek himself? Historians still argue whether the priests genuinely believed the living crocodiles were avatars of the god or simply used them as powerful symbols to draw crowds and secure donations. Sobek wasn't just a god of the river. He was also a protector in the afterlife. Crocodiles were often carved onto tomb walls, their mouths open in a warning snarl. The message was clear: in the journey beyond death, Sobek would guard your soul, or devour it if you dared to cross him. In some burial sites, crocodile amulets were placed on mummies to ensure safe passage. Imagine slipping into eternity with a tiny croc charm tucked into your wrappings just in case. There's even a theory, quirky but plausible, that some Egyptian mothers named their sons after Sobek to give them a tough start in life. Think of it as the ancient version of naming your kid Thor or Hercules. A boy named Sobek Hotep might strut around like he owned the river, and you'd better believe his friends wouldn't tease him lightly. But crocodiles weren't all myth and legend. They were real, dangerous animals. One wrong move, and Sobek might decide you were the snack, not the other way around. Even so, the image of Sobek, half croc, half man, endured for centuries. He symbolized the tension between life's gifts and its dangers. And to the Egyptians, who depended on the river's bounty yet lived in fear of its power, Sobek was both a blessing and a curse wrapped up in scales and teeth. So, next time you see a crocodile basking in the sun, remember that in ancient Egypt, this wasn't just an animal. It was a god, a guardian, and perhaps, just perhaps, a symbol of everything the Nile could give, and everything it could take away. It's feeding time at the crocodile pool. Picture the scene. The air is hot and still. The only sounds the gentle lap of water and the soft murmur of priests in crisp linen robes. The crocodile's massive, scaled, and unblinking float lazily, mouths agape, waiting. And into this calm, a servant steps forward, bearing a tray of offerings. But these aren't scraps or leftovers. Oh no. The crocodiles of the Pharaoh's court dined like royalty, literally. The menu included honey cakes, plum figs, roasted duck, and sometimes even whole geese. Some say the priests even made a sort of crocodile porridge by mashing grains and fruits together, shaping them into balls, and tossing them directly into the waiting jaws. The crocs would lunge, jaws snapping with a force that could crush bone, and the spectators would gasp half in awe, half in nervous laughter. There's an almost absurd charm to it, feeding a creature that could easily eat you instead. Historians still argue whether these feedings were genuine religious rituals or more like public spectacles, a chance for the priests to show off their mastery of these fearsome creatures. Was it worship, or was it entertainment? The lines blur in the swirling dust and heat. Imagine the smell: honeyed cakes mixing with the damp, earthy scent of the Nile water, the sharp tang of fish lingering nearby. The crocodile's skin glistens, scales catching the light like polished stone, and the priests, they move with practiced ease, tossing treats with just the right arc so the croc snaps them up midair. It's a performance as much as it is a ritual. Sometimes, though, the crocs weren't interested in the treats. They'd float, motionless, eyes half-lidded, ignoring the offerings as if to say, "Not today." The priests would whisper prayers, sprinkle sacred water, and try again, hoping the god Sobek was merely in a lazy mood and not offended. If a crocodile refused to eat for too many days, it was seen as an ominous sign of potential warning of drought, disease, or misfortune to come. The tension must have been thick. They are buzzing with the quiet worry of men who knew their fates might hinge on whether a reptile decided to snack. One quirky little detail: there are records suggesting some priests even tried to train their crocodiles to come when called. Picture a man in white linen, standing by the water's edge, clapping softly and calling out, "Come here, swift one." Did it work? Probably not, but it didn't stop them from trying. And somewhere in the dusty temple archives, there's likely a faded note of a crocodile that never quite got the hang of sitting still during prayers. The whole ritual wasn't just about feeding the beasts. It was about balance between humans and nature, between life and death. The crocodiles were a reminder that while the Nile gave life, it also demanded respect. And as those jaws snapped shut, you could almost hear the silent agreement: "We feed you, you spare us not for today, at least." Crocodiles weren't just fed, they were flaunted. Owning a crocodile, especially one lounging in a lavish pool inside a palace or temple, was the ultimate flex in ancient Egypt. It sent a clear message: look at me, I control the river, I have tamed the beast. The same way some people today might show off a luxury car or a private jet, the ancient elite showcased their scaly companions as living proof of their power. Imagine a visiting noble stepping into the palace courtyard for the first time. The first thing they see, not just the towering columns or the gilded statues, but a crocodile huge, sun-warmed, and utterly unfazed lounging in a pool designed just for it. It's as if the pharaoh were saying, "Now, that old thing, just my crocodile. He's harmless, usually." And it wasn't just the pharaohs. High-ranking priests, wealthy officials, and even some regional governors had been known to keep crocodiles, though not everyone could manage the logistics. Keeping a crocodile alive, fed, and let's be honest, not eating the wrong people was a delicate balance. The pools had to be the right temperature, the food had to be fresh, and, as we've discussed, a crocodile that refused to eat could spark serious concern. Imagine explaining to your boss that the sacred crocodile didn't like his goose dinner. Awkward. Historians still argue whether the crocodile pools were purely for show or had deeper religious purposes. Was this about flaunting wealth? Or was it a sign of devotion to Sobek, a way of securing divine favor? Or maybe, just maybe, it was a bit of both, because let's be honest, humans have always loved to show off, especially when it comes to owning something rare and dangerous. And the crocodiles themselves, they were given the best of everything. Their pools were lined with smooth stone, shaded by carefully placed palms, and often filled with fish to snack on. The water came from the Nile, channeled in through specially built aqueducts. Some pools even had decorative carvings along the sides: lotus blossoms, reeds, and hieroglyphs praising Sobek and the pharaoh. The crocodile, basking in such luxury, became a living symbol of royal power and divine connection. One quirky little fact: in some regions, it's said the crocodiles were adorned with jewelry. Imagine that: tiny golden anklets or collars fitted onto a creature that could kill you with a single bite. It's both absurd and strangely charming, isn't it? as if the ancient Egyptians were trying to soften the edges of the crocodile's ferocity, to make it seem just a little more tame, a little more pet-like. And yet, despite the luxury, crocodiles were always a risk. You could pamper them, feed them, even drape them in gold, but you could never forget what they truly were. They were ancient predators, unchanged for millions of years. And deep down, every Egyptian knew, the river might belong to the pharaoh in name, but in truth, it belonged to Sobekan, to the crocodiles who called it home. So, next time you imagine an ancient Egyptian palace, don't forget the pools. And in those pools, a crocodile or two basking, watching, waiting. A symbol of power, a reminder of danger, and maybe, just maybe, the ancient world's ultimate status pet. Were these crocodiles really pets, or more like prisoners with an audience? That's the question historians still debate, and it's a tricky one. On the one hand, the care given to the crocodile's luxurious pools, lavish meals, even mummification after death suggests a certain affection, or at least respect. But on the other hand, it's hard to imagine the crocodiles themselves feeling very loved as they lounged in pools under the watchful eyes of priests and visitors, waiting for the next meal or the next ritual. Let's be real for a moment. If you owned a cat and had to keep it chained to a perch, constantly performing in front of guests, would you call that a pet or a prop? The same question applies to these crocodiles. Sure, they were fed well. Yes, they were protected from harm unless they lashed out. But were they loved in the way we think of pet love today? That's where the story gets murky. Imagine being a crocodile in a temple courtyard. The water is cool, the sun is warm, and the priests bring you honey cakes and the occasional duck. Sounds like a good life, right? Except there are always eyes on you. Always someone watching, waiting to see if you'll snap at a priest's robe or devour the offering whole. The moment you get to feisty, there's a real chance you'll be, let's say, retired. And retirement for a crocodile didn't mean a nice pond out in the country. It usually meant a swift end, if you were lucky, a mummification ceremony. Historians still argue whether these crocodiles were considered divine beings, living symbols of Sobek, or if they were simply powerful animals kept as a reminder of the gods. Some suggest that the more pampered crocodiles, those with names, jewelry, and special pools, were treated more like sacred animals. Others argue they were just well-fed prisoners, paraded out for festivals and rituals, a sort of living exhibit that kept the people in awe and the priests in power. And what about the handlers? They were the true risk-takers in this setup. Feeding a crocodile by hand is not exactly the safest career choice, and there are tales passed down in temple records of handlers who lost fingers, hands, or even their lives. One scroll tells the story of a priest who slipped while offering a goose, his foot splashing into the pool. The crocodile lunged, jaws snapping shut like a vice, and the man disappeared beneath the water. His sandals were later retrieved, sitting eerily on the edge of the pool, a silent warning to others. It makes you wonder, did the crocodiles ever see themselves as pets, or were they simply biding their time, waiting for a chance to turn the tables? There's even a fringe theory whispered among some Egyptologists that certain pharaohs intentionally kept their crocodiles slightly hungry during public ceremonies. A hungry crocodile is an impressive crocodile. After all, the tension in the air as a half-starved croc lunged for a thrown duck must have been palpable, both thrilling and terrifying. Whether that's true or just the whispers of academics trying to spice up the past, it adds a fascinating, if unsettling, layer to the story. So, were the crocodiles beloved pets or captive gods? The answer, as with so much in history, is likely a bit of both. They were worshipped, yes. They were fed, pampered even. But they were also dangerous, unpredictable, and always just one quick twist of the tail away from reminding everyone who really ruled the river. Names have power, and in ancient Egypt, this extended to the crocodiles, too. These creatures weren't just the crocodile by the pool or that one in the corner. Oh no, many of them had names, sometimes even grand ones. Picture a priest in crisp linen robes, stepping carefully to the edge of the pool, calling out, "Come, Swift One," or "Biter, your meal is ready." Yes, names like Swift One, Biter, and Sharp Teeth, simple, practical, and a little terrifying. There's something oddly charming about imagining a croc responding, at least in theory, to a name like it's a scaly dog. And the names didn't stop there. Some priests, in their more poetic moments, gave the crocodiles titles that hinted at personality: Watcher in the Water, Sunbather, River's Whisper. It makes you wonder, did they really believe the crocodiles could understand, or was it more for show? Historians still argue whether these names were part of genuine bonding rituals or simply a way to make the creatures seem less threatening to the crowds. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Pharaohs themselves sometimes took on crocodile-related names. Imagine a ruler calling himself Sobek Hotep, meaning Sobek is pleased. It's like branding yourself as the one who makes the crocodile happy. Not exactly a name that strikes fear into your enemies, but in a land where the Nile was life, it was a name packed with meaning. You were aligning yourself with the power of the river, the strength of the predator, and the blessings of the gods. Naming wasn't just about formality, it was about creating a bond. Or at least, trying to. Picture a crocodile, eyes half-lidded, basking on the warm stone, while a priest earnestly calls its name, hoping for a flick of the tail or a lazy blink. Did the crocodiles ever learn their names? That's anyone's guess. Maybe they recognized the sound of their feeder's voice. Or maybe they just knew when dinner time was near. Names be darned. There's a quirky tidbit here, too. In one old papyrus fragment, there's a story of a crocodile named Softfoot, who was apparently known for being unusually docile until the day it suddenly snapped at a priest's hand during a feeding ritual. The scroll simply notes, he was mistaken in his trust. Softfoot became sharp teeth in a blink. It's hard not to smile at the thought of these ancient priests trying to build relationships with creatures whose brains were, let's be honest, about the size of a walnut. The priests might have been chanting sacred hymns, whispering prayers, or offering polished stones engraved with the croc's name, all in the hope of taming the untamable. And maybe, just maybe, they convinced themselves it worked. But at the end of the day, a crocodile is a crocodile. Whether you call it Swift One, Sharp Teeth, or River's Whisper, it's still a prehistoric powerhouse, lurking in the water, waiting for the right moment to remind you that in the grand scheme of things, you're just a soft, slow-moving snack. Still, the names endure, etched into temple walls, scratched onto votive offerings, whispered in the dark corners of the priestly chambers. They're a reminder of an ancient world where humans tried to bridge the gap between themselves and the wild, where they named the things they feared most, and hoped that names alone might keep them safe. The crocodiles didn't just lounge in any old pond. No, these pools were sacred spaces, carefully maintained by priests known as the keepers of the sacred pools. Imagine their daily routine: dawn breaking over the temple, a soft breeze ruffling the reeds, and a handful of white-robed figures already at work, scooping fallen leaves from the water, sprinkling it with herbs, and checking the banks for any signs of damage. It was part animal care, part ritual, and part high-stakes water maintenance. After all, when your pool houses a creature that could end your life with a single lunge, you'd better be sure the water stays clean, the food keeps coming, and the crocodile remains as content as a croc can be. The pools themselves were marvels of design. Carved from stone and sometimes lined with smooth tiles, they were often filled by small channels that diverted water straight from the Nile, ensuring a constant flow. The sound of trickling water would fill the courtyard, a calming backdrop that hid the underlying tension, because lurking beneath the surface was a creature with a jaw pressure stronger than any other. In the animal kingdom, you'd walk past the pool, hear the splash of water, and wonder, is it just a fish moving, or something else? Historians still argue whether these pools were purely functional or if they held deeper spiritual meaning. Were they built simply to house the crocodiles in a controlled environment, or did the priests believe that the pools themselves, connected to the Nile, were part of a divine circuit, a literal channel linking the temple to the gods? Some scholars suggest the design mirrored the primeval waters of creation in Egyptian mythology, making the crocodiles living symbols of both chaos and protection. It's a beautiful theory, and one that gives new meaning to the soft ripples spreading across the pool's surface. One quirky detail: the keepers of the sacred pools sometimes used perfumes to anoint the water, a mix of lotus and frankincense that they believed would please Sobek. Imagine standing at the edge of the pool, inhaling that fragrant air while a crocodile eyes you lazily from just a few feet away. The contrast between the soft, floral scent and the sharp, reptilian tang of the croc must have been striking. And the priests, They'd murmur prayers, sprinkle oils, and even toss in small offerings, bits of bread, beads, or tiny carved figurines, hoping to keep the crocodiles content and the gods satisfied. The crocodiles, for their part, seemed to accept the arrangement. They'd slide into the water, sending small waves against the pool's stone edges, or bask in the sun, their scales gleaming like polished onyx. Some were said to have favorite spots, corners of the pool where the sun hit just right, or shaded patches where they could doze undisturbed. The priests learned these preferences, adjusting feeding times and rituals accordingly. It was part management, part appeasement, and, let's be honest, part sheer survival instinct. But not every day was smooth. There were accidents, priests who got too close, offerings that went awry, moments when the crocodile's patience wore thin. Those incidents became whispered warnings, passed down from keeper to keeper. Stay back during the heat of the day. Never turn your back on biter, or don't wear red by the pool, he hates it. Superstition or practical advice? Probably both. They believed they were serving Sobek, tending to the balance between man and nature. And as the sun set, casting long shadows over the courtyard, you could hear the faint splash of a crocodile shifting in the water, a reminder that in this ancient world, the line between reverence and fear was as thin as a priest's linen robe. Crocodile mummies. Yes, you heard that right, mummified crocodiles, wrapped in linen, anointed with oils, and laid to rest with the same reverence given to nobles and even pharaohs. The ancient Egyptians didn't do things halfway. If a crocodile was sacred in life, it remained so in death, and the process of preparing a croc for the afterlife was a meticulous, almost loving craft. Imagine the scene: a cool, dim chamber within a temple, the air heavy with the scent of resin and frankincense. Priests in linen tunics moved carefully around a massive crocodile, its body stretched out on a stone slab. They anoint its scales with sacred oils, myrrh, cedar, lotus, whispering prayers as they work. The crocodile's eyes are closed, its jaw tied shut with papyrus twine. Linen bandages, long and soft, are wound around the creature's body in neat, careful layers. Sometimes, amulets, small carved figures of Sobek, scarabs, or the Eye of Horus were tucked into the wrappings for protection. It's hard not to smile at the thought of a crocodile, embalmed with the same care as a pharaoh, drifting into the afterlife with a tiny golden amulet nestled between its teeth. Historians still argue whether all crocodile mummies were once pets or simply offerings, bred and raised solely for ritual purposes. Some mummified crocs were tiny, mere hatchlings, wrapped quickly and offered to temples as thanks or prayers. Others, though, were full-grown monsters, stretching over 15 feet long. These colossal specimens were often discovered in temple crypts, sealed in stone coffins, their presence a testament to the sheer scale of ancient devotion. There's a quirky tidbit about the crocodile mummies from the Temple of Kamombo. Some of them weren't exactly pure crocodile. In the rush to meet demand, especially during festival seasons, priests sometimes cheated a little, wrapping up bundles of reeds, sticks, or even parts of other animals inside crocodile-shaped packages. Imagine the scene: a devoted pilgrim purchases a crocodile mummy as an offering, only to find out, centuries later through an X-ray, that it's mostly straw. It's an ancient version of buying a luxury handbag and discovering it's a clever knockoff. Still, for the ancient Egyptians, the symbolism mattered more than the details. Whether it was a living, breathing crocodile or a carefully wrapped bundle of linen and twigs, the act of offering was the key. You made your donation, whispered your prayer, and hoped Sobek would bless your fields, protect your boat, or ease your journey into the afterlife. Crocodile mummies weren't just scattered around randomly either. They were often stored in dedicated crypts, deep beneath temples, in long rows that must have smelled like dust, oil, and centuries of devotion. Some tombs held dozens, even hundreds of these sacred creatures, each one a testament to the belief that crocodiles weren't just dangerous beasts but sacred beings, guardians of the Nile, messengers of Sobek, and, in a way, partners in the cycle of life and death. So, next time you picture an ancient Egyptian tomb, don't just think of golden masks and treasure. Think of the rows of crocodiles, silently waiting in the dark, wrapped tight in linen, as if they might wake at any moment and slither back into the river, ready to remind the world of the ancient power they once held. Crocodiles, no matter how pampered, were still wild creatures. And sometimes, the fine line between sacred pet and untamed beast blurred with deadly consequences. There are whispered stories, half hidden in ancient texts, of crocodiles turning on their handlers or even priests mid-ritual. You can almost imagine it, a priest in flowing linen robes, offering a honey cake to a crocodile like Swift One, only to have the creature lunge, jaws snapping shut with a wet, bone-crunching crack. The onlookers would gasp, some frozen in place, others scattering like startled ibis. And the crocodile. It would simply float back into the water, as if nothing had happened, the calm surface hiding the chaos below. One such tale comes from an old papyrus fragment torn and barely legible, telling of a priest named Het who was said to have angered the god during a festival. He leaned too far over the pool, they say, perhaps offering a blessing or a song, when the crocodile lunged and dragged him into the water. They pulled him out eventually, but not in one piece. The incident was hushed up, quietly labeled an accident, but you can almost hear the murmurs around the temple. Was it Hatep's clumsy mistake? Or had he displeased Sobek? Historians still argue whether these incidents were random acts of nature or seen as divine punishments. Either way, you probably wouldn't have wanted to be the next priest in line for crocodile duty. There were also quieter risks. Feeding time might seem like a peaceful, almost meditative moment, tossing cakes and figs into the pool, the sunlight dancing on the water, but there was always a flicker of tension. A nervous glance exchanged between handlers. Even the most docile crocodile could, in an instant, shift from lazy sunbather to a snapping, thrashing fury. It's a reminder that no matter how many rituals you perform, or how many sacred names you bestow, a crocodile is a crocodile. It doesn't care about your linen robes or your fancy titles. It cares about its belly, its territory, and that primal, ancient instinct that says, if it moves, I might just eat it. One quirky detail, in some temple records, there are notes that crocodile bites were sometimes treated as blessings. Yes, you heard that right, blessings. The logic was a bit twisted. If a sacred crocodile bit you and you survived, it meant you were favored by Sobek. Imagine limping around the temple courtyard, showing off a fresh crocodile bite like it's a lucky charm. Oh, this, just a little love nibble from Swift One. No big deal. Of course, not everyone was so lucky. There are accounts of temple workers disappearing without a trace, their sandals or tools found near the crocodile pools, the water eerily calm. The priests, in their prayers, would murmur for their souls, but quietly, they'd also whisper, stay back. So while the crocodiles were symbols of power, fertility, and protection, they were also a constant reminder of the thin line between life and death. One careless moment, one step too close, and you might find yourself part of a story whispered by the temple walls for generations to come. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you might think, maybe keeping a crocodile in a pool was a bold statement, but it was also a gamble. A roll of the dice, every single day. There's a story, half legend, half whispered cautionary tale that speaks of a pharaoh who went for a final swim. It's said that the ruler, perhaps bored with court life or simply seeking the thrill of the hunt, decided one evening to visit his private crocodile pool. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting long, golden shadows across the water. The scent of papyrus and lotus drifted on the breeze. The pharaoh, in fine linens and a golden collar glinting in the fading light, stood at the water's edge, staff in hand. He watched the crocodiles glide lazily beneath the surface, silent, ancient, watching him back. With a smirk, or perhaps a quiet word of challenge to Sobek himself, the pharaoh waded into the shallows, a spear resting across his shoulders. Was he hunting, praying, showing off? The stories differ. But what is agreed upon, at least in the dusty temple scrolls and fragmented wall carvings, is that he didn't return. The next morning, the palace buzzed with panic. Servants searched the grounds, priests performed hurried rites, and courtiers whispered behind their hands. Eventually, all they found were scraps of linen, a golden armband glinting at the pool's edge, and the swirling ripple of the water, calm as if nothing had happened. The crocodiles floated silently, as they always did, eyes half-lidded, watching. Historians still argue whether this event ever truly happened. Was it an embellished tale told to warn future rulers not to toy with the crocodiles? Or did a pharaoh genuinely disappear into the pool, swallowed by the very creature he claimed to master? Some point to a name missing from the royal lists, a sudden gap in the records. Others say it was simply a cautionary fable, a whispered reminder that even kings bow to the river and its sharp-toothed guardians. Some speculate that political rivals, perhaps ambitious priests or scheming courtiers, orchestrated the event. A crocodile accident, after all, would leave no witnesses, no body, and no clear trail of guilt. Just a ripple in the water and a lingering sense of unease. One quirky detail that adds to the mystery: a few temple reliefs show a crocodile wearing a golden collar, a piece of jewelry similar to those worn by royalty. Could this be a subtle nod to the pharaoh's fate, or just a coincidence an artist's flourish? We may never know, but it's a tantalizing thought. A crocodile gliding through the water, scales gleaming, the sun catching on a golden band as it moves silently, forever entwined with the memory of a vanished king. And so the story lingers, passed down through generations. A pharaoh who thought himself above nature, above the gods, swallowed by the very symbol of the river's power. Whether true or not, it's a story that makes you pause, just for a moment, when you walk by the water's edge and feel the weight of ancient eyes watching from beneath the surface. Crocodile dung, yes. You heard that right. In ancient Egypt, it wasn't just the crocodiles themselves that held value sometimes, it was their waste. Imagine this, a temple courtyard where priests carefully collect the droppings left behind by the sacred crocodiles. Why? Because crocodile dung, in the eyes of the ancients, wasn't just waste. It was potential, a strange, stinking, vaguely magical substance that, according to some beliefs, could ward off evil, ease skin ailments, and, in one particularly odd case, act as an ingredient in what we'd now call sunscreen. Picture an ancient Egyptian beauty ritual. A noble woman, reclining on a cushioned chair, her servant applying a paste to her arms and face. The mixture smells earthy, almost bitter, but the woman accepts it without question. After all, it's said to protect the skin from the harsh desert sun, maybe even keep wrinkles at bay. Historians still argue whether crocodile dung was actually effective or if it was more of a symbolic gesture wearing the essence of Sobek, so to speak, as a form of divine protection. And it wasn't just the women. Men, too, might use crocodile-based ointments. There's a fringe theory that some warriors applied it to their skin before battle, believing it would give them the strength and ferocity of a crocodile. Imagine a row of soldiers, glistening under the sun, reeking faintly of river mud and crocodile waste, convinced they were invincible. The placebo effect is a powerful thing, but the uses of crocodile dung didn't stop at beauty or battle. In some fertility rituals, it was burned with herbs and offered to Sobek, a smoky, pungent prayer for strong suns and healthy harvests. And, just when you think it can't get stranger, there are ancient recipes scribbled in faded ink on scraps of papyrus that suggest crocodile dung mixed with honey was used as a contraceptive. Imagine the whispered advice passed from mother to daughter: if you don't want another baby this year, a little crocodile dung should do the trick. Quirky, absolutely. Effective, let's just say. Modern medicine has its doubts. One detail that always raises a smile: some temple workers, when assigned the less than glamorous task of collecting dung, tried to spin it into an honor. After all, if the crocodiles were sacred, wasn't everything they produced sacred too? You can almost hear the half-hearted enthusiasm. Oh yes, I'm the keeper of the sacred offerings. It's a reminder that even in the grandest temples, someone had to do the less than glorious jobs. Of course, not everyone believed in the power of crocodile dung. Ancient skeptics, the practical types, probably grumbled quietly in the background, rolling their eyes at the latest dung-based cure-all. Oh, your skin's dry, rub some croc dung on it. Oh, you want to avoid another child. Croc dung. Stubbed your toe. You guessed it, croc dung. Still, when you live in a world where the gods are everywhere, and even a crocodile is a symbol of divine power, it's easy to see how a little superstition could stick. So, next time you slather on sunscreen or dab on a fancy serum, think back to ancient Egypt. Think of the priests, the pools, the crocodiles, and the quiet, almost reverent collection of something most of us would avoid at all costs. And remember, in the land of the Nile, even the dung of a crocodile could be seen as a gift from the gods. Imagine you're an ancient Greek tourist, stepping off your boat onto Egyptian soil, the sun glaring down, the air thick with the scent of the Nile. You've heard the stories, whispers of strange rituals, crocodile gods, and pools filled with living monsters. And now, here you are, standing at the edge of a temple courtyard, staring at a crocodile pool, your sandals coated in fine dust, a mixture of awe and fear bubbling up inside you. The crocodiles, massive and motionless, bask in the heat, eyes half-lidded, tails flicking lazily. To the priests, these creatures are sacred, living embodiments of Sobek, but to you, a foreigner unfamiliar with these customs, they're terrifying. You watch a priest step up, toss a honey cake into the pool, and whisper a prayer. The crocodile lunges, jaws snapping shut with a sound that echoes off the temple walls. Your heart leaps into your throat, and you take a nervous step back. Ancient travelers left mixed reviews of these crocodile pools, and it's not hard to see why. Some wrote in awe, praising the devotion and the grandeur of the temples. They marveled at the sacred beasts and the care given to them, describing the pools as a testament to Egypt's connection to the gods. Others, though, were less charitable. They scoffed at the idea of worshipping such dangerous creatures, calling the rituals strange, even barbaric. Historians still argue whether these accounts were exaggerated for effect after all. A little sensationalism makes for a better story back home, or if they reflected genuine shock and discomfort at such an unfamiliar tradition. One Greek writer, Herodotus, described visiting a crocodile pool and being invited to toss offerings to the creatures. He wrote, with a hint of dry humor, that he politely declined, preferring to watch from a safe distance. Can you blame him? The image of standing at the edge of a pool, honey cake in hand, while a crocodile twice your size sizes you up, is enough to make anyone think twice. But for the Egyptians, the sight of crocodiles basking in their pools wasn't strange at all. It was part of daily life, a symbol of harmony between humans and nature, though, as we know, it was a precarious harmony at best. The priests performed their duties with calm precision, while visitors gawked, whispered, and sometimes hurried away with wide eyes and a story to tell. One quirky note: some enterprising locals near the temples set up little stalls selling miniature crocodile figurines to visitors, an ancient form of souvenir shopping. Take home a piece of Sobek's blessing, they might have called out, offering tiny carved amulets in exchange for a few copper coins. You can almost hear the sales pitch: protect your boat, your harvest, and your family. Sobek's power, in the palm of your hand. Not everyone was convinced, of course. There were skeptics even among the tourists, those who muttered that it was all for show, a clever way for the priests to collect offerings and fees. And maybe they weren't entirely wrong. Religion and economy often swam in the same waters, after all. So, picture yourself back there, standing by the pool, there humming with heat, the distant sound of chanting in the temple halls. A crocodile shifts in the water, eyes glinting in the sunlight, and you can't help but shiver. Tourist attraction or terror in ancient Egypt? Sometimes it was both. The palaces and temples of the elite held entire menageries, little kingdoms of creatures gathered from across the known world. Picture this: a courtyard where sacred ibis birds strut gracefully, their beaks glinting in the sun. Monkeys chatter from the branches of imported trees, perhaps swiping fruit from passing trays. Gazelles graze under the careful watch of handlers, their eyes wide and alert. And tucked into a quiet corner, a leopard dozes, its spots flickering like shadows beneath the papyrus fronds. The crocodiles, of course, were the stars of the show, massive, ancient, and menacing in their pools, but they weren't alone. Others maintained fish ponds, with tilapia darting through the water like little silver blessings. There were baboons too, sacred to Thoth, the god of wisdom, often depicted scribbling hieroglyphs on scrolls. Imagine a baboon priest, quill in hand, looking down its long nose at a scribe's mistake. Historians still argue whether these menageries were simply symbols of power, collections of exotic creatures meant to impress visitors, or whether they had deeper religious significance. Was the leopard a representation of strength? The ibis, a messenger of the gods? Or were they, like the crocodiles, part of a careful performance, a way for priests and rulers to remind the people that they alone could tame the wild, that they could harness nature itself in service of the divine? There's a quirky tidbit here: some temples kept sacred geese that were trained well, as much as geese can be trained to honk at the approach of strangers. A feathered alarm system, if you will. Imagine the scene: a temple courtyard. They are warm and still, when suddenly a flock of geese erupts into honking chaos, warning of an intruder. Not quite as majestic as a crocodile lunge, but still effective. The logistics of it all must have been staggering. Feeding schedules, cleaning routines, safety precautions. The priests overseeing these menageries had their hands full. And it wasn't all serene harmony. Animals fought, escaped, and sometimes, yes, disappeared. One record tells of a prized leopard that simply vanished one night, never seen again. Theories ranged from divine intervention to a very bold thief or perhaps a particularly brave crocodile with an adventurous palate. Even the gardens themselves were part of the menagerie magic. Carefully cultivated plants, lotus blossoms, papyrus, sycamores, even exotic flowers imported from distant lands lined the courtyards and pathways. The scents of jasmine and myrrh mingled with the more pungent aromas of the animals, creating a sensory tapestry unique to these temple spaces. Imagine wandering through such a garden, your feet crunching on gravel. They are shimmering with heat, the calls of birds and the occasional splash of a crocodile breaking the stillness. The Nile's hidden menagerie wasn't just a spectacle. It was a statement. Here is the power of Egypt, gathered, displayed, and at least in theory controlled. A reminder that the pharaohs, in their divine wisdom, could bring the farthest reaches of the world to their doorstep. And if a crocodile happened to snap at a baboon or a goose tried to peck a priest's sandal, well, that was just part of the dance. So, next time you picture an ancient Egyptian temple, don't stop at the stone columns and golden statues. Picture the living, breathing creatures, feathers rustling, scales glinting, tails flicking, and know that for the Egyptians, the divine wasn't just in the heavens. It was in the animals that watched, prowled, and sometimes, very nearly, ruled the earth. Could the Egyptians really tame crocodiles? It's a question that's fascinated historians, dreamers, and animal lovers alike. After all, the image of a priest calling out to a 15-foot reptile and having it glide obediently across the water is both absurd and oddly charming. Some stories hint at this possibility, whispers of crocodiles responding to names, swimming over when summoned, or even allowing priests to stroke their armored backs without so much as a twitch. But were these tales true? Or just hopeful exaggerations passed down to impress and awe? Historians still argue about the practicality of taming a creature whose brain is, frankly, the size of a walnut. Crocodiles are not like dogs or horses. They don't bond with humans, they don't crave affection, and they certainly don't fetch. What they do understand, though, is food. And that might be the key to those ancient stories. A crocodile, fed regularly by the same person, might learn that when the priest approaches with a platter of honey cakes or roasted duck, it's snack time, not attack time. That's not taming in the warm, fuzzy sense, it's conditioning. The croc isn't loyal, it's just hungry. Still, you can almost imagine the priests hoping, maybe even convincing themselves, that there was a connection. Picture a priest in linen robes, standing by the pool, murmuring softly to Swift One, coaxing the beast with bits of bread, a nervous smile on his face as the crocodile blinks once, twice, then glides closer. Did the crocodile come for the priest or for the bread? It's hard to say. But that quiet moment, the illusion of understanding between man and beast, must have felt magical. Or maybe terrifying, depends on your perspective. One quirky detail: some temples had rituals where priests would introduce a new crocodile to the existing pool. They'd perform a ceremony, sprinkle herbs over the water, and gently slide the new croc in, watching nervously to see if the others accepted it or attacked. It was like an ancient version of a meet and greet, except with a much higher chance of sudden violence. And if the newcomer did get along, that was seen as a sign of divine favor, a blessing from Sobek himself. If not, well, better luck next time. The idea of taming crocodiles wasn't entirely unique to Egypt. Later, in Roman times, there were stories of crocodiles being paraded in amphitheaters, even used in staged hunts. But in Egypt, the crocodile held a different place, less entertainment, more sacred symbol. The idea of controlling a crocodile was more than a spectacle. It was a metaphor for Egypt's power over the wild, a testament to their mastery of the unpredictable forces of nature. Or at least, that's what the priests told themselves. And the tourists and the scribes. In truth, though, it's likely that most tamed crocodiles were simply well-fed, lethargic, and disinterested in moving too much when the sun was blazing overhead. A crocodile with a full belly and a warm rock to lie on isn't exactly eager to chase down a priest. The ancient Egyptians may not have tamed crocodiles in the way we think of taming today, but they did learn how to manage them, feeding them, housing them, and, when necessary, mummifying them. So, could you train a crocodile like a golden retriever? Not a chance. But could you convince it to swim over for a snack? Maybe even nudge your hand with its snout before sinking back into the water? Sure. And in that small, fleeting interaction, the Egyptians found a glimpse of the divine, a moment when the wild seemed to bow to the will of man. Just don't get too close to the teeth. For centuries, crocodiles basked in their temple pools, basking in sun and worship alike. But like so many chapters of history, the crocodile's reign as a sacred symbol eventually began to fade. The reasons: a mix of shifting landscapes, shifting politics, and the relentless march of time. The Nile itself changed over generations, its flooding patterns altered, sometimes more generous, sometimes less. Silt built up in some places, channels dried in others. As the river's course twisted and turned, some crocodile pools were left high and dry, their once flowing channels choked with reeds or blocked by human settlements. Without the water, the pools became stagnant pits, less sacred, more smelly nuisance. And then there were the invaders. Foreign powers: Persians, Greeks, Romans, each brought their own ideas, religions, and, frankly, different opinions on the whole "let's worship crocodiles" thing. While some conquerors admired the crocodiles and even sent a few home as exotic pets, others saw them as primitive relics of a superstitious past. The temples that once echoed with hymns to Sobek grew quieter. The priests found their flocks thinning, the crowds smaller, the donations fewer. Historians still argue whether this decline was a slow, natural drift away from crocodile worship or a sudden collapse under the weight of new rulers and their religions. Perhaps it was a bit of both. As Christianity spread through Egypt, the old gods, including Sobek, faded into the background. The pools dried up, the sacred crocodiles disappeared, and the once bustling temple courtyards fell into quiet disrepair. One quirky tidbit: in some parts of Egypt, even as Sobek's formal cult faded, local fishermen continued to leave small offerings by the riverbank just in case. A token fish, a scrap of bread, a whispered prayer. Old habits die hard, after all. You can almost hear the logic. I don't worship the crocodile, of course not, but, well, it can't hurt to stay on its good side. And what happened to the crocodiles themselves? They didn't vanish entirely, of course. The Nile is still home to crocodiles today, though they're far less common than they were in the days of the pharaohs. Habitat loss, hunting, and changing rivers have all taken their toll. The once majestic pools of the temples are mostly ruins now, the crocodile mummies tucked away in museums, their teeth gleaming faintly under glass. Still, the echoes remain. The crocodile, gliding through murky water, is a living fossil, a creature that watched the pyramids rise, that lounged in temple pools as incense curled in the air. That's so priests kneel and whisper prayers to Sobek. And though the worship has faded, there's a certain power in knowing that these creatures are still out there, basking on the muddy banks, watching with ancient eyes. So next time you see a crocodile, whether it's in a river or behind thick glass at a zoo, remember, you're looking at an animal that once ruled as a living god, a beast that inspired all fear and devotion in equal measure. And somewhere in the dust of Egypt's ruins, if you listen closely, you might just hear the faint splash of a tail, a soft ripple in the water, and the whisper of a story that refuses to be forgotten. The story of Egypt's sacred crocodiles ends, as all stories do, in whispers and sand. Today, along the Nile, crocodiles still swim, but they are fewer, more elusive. They slip between reeds, eyes barely breaking the water's surface, ancient watchers in a world that's largely forgotten the power they once held. The temples are quiet now, stone walls cracked and worn by wind and time, the pools dry, their smooth stones faded to pale gray. But the memory lingers. You can almost see it. If you close your eyes, the grand courtyards once filled with chanting priests and curious visitors. They are buzzing with incense and heat. A crocodile, perhaps swift one, slides into the water with a splash, the ripple breaking the perfect reflection of palm trees and sky. The priest calls softly, offering a honey cake. A moment's pause, then a lunge, a snap, and the watching crowd lets out a breath they didn't know they were holding. The tension, the danger, all part of the ritual. Historians still argue whether the crocodile cult was born of fear or faith, Or maybe a little of both. Did the Egyptians truly believe the crocodiles were divine, or were they symbols of something deeper, life's unpredictability, the thin line between blessing and curse, between safety and sudden snapping jaws? No one can say for sure. But what's clear is that these creatures left their mark not just on temple walls and mummified bundles, but on the very heart of Egyptian culture. One quirky detail that survived in folk memory, even centuries later: some villages along the Nile told stories of crocodiles as protectors, not just predators. There are tales of crocodiles guarding fishermen, of spirits in the shape of crocs watching over boats, guiding them safely through treacherous waters. The sacred connection may have faded from the temples, but in the quiet minds of those living by the river, it lingered, like a faint ripple that never quite disappears. And so, the echoes of the crocodile pools remain not just in museums, not just in the faded carvings of Sobek with his sharp teeth and regal crown, but in the very idea that humans once tried to coexist with something so dangerous, so ancient, so fundamentally untamable. The priests may have whispered prayers, the pharaohs may have strutted by their pools, but in the end, it was always the crocodile who ruled the water, the silent king of the Nile. As the sun dips low and the day fades, imagine the last croc sliding beneath the surface, the water closing above it, leaving only ripples and the faint scent of lotus in the air. The story is done, the water is still, and the crocodiles, they are watching, still. Now, as the echoes of our journey through the crocodile pools fade, let's slow down. Let the images settle softly, temples bathed in golden sunlight, the slow ripple of a crocodile's tail in the water, the scent of lotus and myrrh drifting on the breeze. Picture the quiet now, the stone walls warm from the day's heat, the pool still and dark, reflecting the first stars as they blink into the night sky. A breeze stirs the reeds at the water's edge, the sound so soft it's almost a whisper. You can almost feel the ancient hush in the air, can't you? The weight of centuries, the slow, steady pulse of the Nile, and the faintest memory of Joe's snapping in the dusk. It's a story of balance between awe and fear, life and death, man and nature. And as the last of the incense smoke curls away into the cool evening, there's a sense of closure. The crocodiles, the pools, the priests all drift away into the sands of time, leaving only stories behind. So, let's breathe deeply, in and out. Let the weight of the day sink away, like the sun slipping beneath the horizon. Imagine the calm lapping of water against stone, the distant call of a heron in the dark, the slow, rhythmic heartbeat of a world far removed from ours. And as you rest tonight, maybe dream of a place where crocodiles glide beneath ancient stars, guardians of forgotten temples, silent and watching still. Thank you for joining me on this journey. May your night be as calm as the still waters of an ancient crocodile pool. Good night and sleep tight.